Hello everyone, it's Phil Jones and joining me is Jason from AVPro. And today we're going to be talking about long distance HDMI solutions. So Jason, how are you?
I'm great, Phil. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's very, very hot right now.
Yeah, exactly. I get asked about it all the time, and it's half the time when you have a problems because you can't get your video signal from point A to point B.
Or
But
Trump.
before we get started, we'd like to thank our sponsors, AVPro and Meridio, for helping us put on this year's Projection Summit, where we talk about all of the things you need to create a great projection system. So, Jason, can you talk a little bit about AVPro and it's part of this big group of companies, right?
Yeah, so one thing that I just love is we are a family-owned, family-ran company. We own our factory. The engineers are our people. We're not outsourcing anything to anybody. We'll probably get into this a little bit later with our latest AV over IP system, which is really doing well right now. We even make the network switch. So we try to keep as much stuff in-house as possible. So under this AV Pro Global umbrella, we have AV Pro Edge, which is what most people know us for the most part. And that's all of our connectivity stuff that we'll talk about today. Bullet Train, that's our HDMI cables. You and I have talked about Meridio quite a bit. That's all of our test and measurement equipment. And then our newest brand is MXNet, and that's specifically for our AV over IP ecosystem. So under all these different brands, we are all one big, happy, family-owned company.
So we've talked a lot before about several of their solutions. Like for example, I have been using AV Pro Edge extenders
Hmm.
for as long as I can remember.
Yep.
HDBT, fiber, the list goes on and on. So I'm a big fan of their stuff. In addition, so I use their cables, the bullet train cables, a lot when it
Yeah.
comes for most of my systems. All of my stuff is wired with bullet train. So great solution. But as cables get longer, moving signals from point A to point B gets more and more challenging. And that's where I think that AV Pro has really shined from the very beginning. So from the very beginning, I remember the way that I met Jason was I was walking around CEDIA, got to be maybe 5 years ago,
That
and
dude,
I
that
was challenging companies to say, show me a 18 gigabit HDMI solution that will go longer than I think I was asking for 20 meters.
that sounds right.
And and everybody was like, "Oh, well, this supports 4K 60." I'm like, "That's not enough.
Yeah.
Is it 4K 60 for 8-bit? What are we talking about? Show
Right.
me 18." And everybody kind of danced around the topic. And I went to their booth, and they were like, "Oh, we have this solution, this solution, this solution," and they
Hmm.
showed me a ton of different solutions that met my needs. So after that, we became buddies. I've always been a big fan of their stuff because it does what it says it's going to do, and it does it effectively and reliably. So whether we're talking about HD-based all the different HD-based T solutions and things like that, like for example, a big thing right now is ARC, the ability to
Oh
pass
yeah.
signal using enhanced audio return or audio return channel. A lot of HD-based T extenders do not support ARC,
Hmm.
but you guys have one that does, a couple of them that do, right?
Not every model, but you're exactly right. If somebody needs ARC or eARC because maybe their source is the internal apps on the TV and they want to get the audio back to their rack for distribution, then yeah, we definitely have something that'll work with ARC.
I also deal with audio. So the
Yes.
importance of having ARC, because if you're trying to say you have a device like a smart projector or a smart TV and 85-inch, 100-inch hanging on the wall, and you're trying to send that signal from the built-in Netflix back to your AVR,
Hmm.
the best way you get it is to send it via enhanced audio return channel back to your AVR. So if you have a Cat 6 in your wall and Cat 7 or whatever those things in your wall, and all of a sudden now you go, wow, I got this brand new TV and it's doing 8K stuff in full surround sound. Well, you got to get the surround sound back to the TV. A lot of times the first services are going to be built into the TV or
Hmm.
into the display device because they're the ones that sponsor them. So if
Right.
you have this big fancy Samsung or Sony and they're now showing, Guardians of the Galaxy in 8K, most
Yeah.
likely it's going to be a service built into the TV
Sure.
or the display, and you won't be able to get it as an external box. So you got to get the sound from that display back to your AVR.
A lot of people say, okay, ARC's not going to work for some reason. Insert your own excuse why it won't work. So they say, okay, I'm going to go optical, and it's just going to be okay. So we're going to go optical back to the soundbar, or optical back to the AVR or whatnot. And you have sound and you're happy. And it's super compressed. It's not what you're going to want if you have a newer system with all these high-res audio formats and whatnot. So that sort of evolves into ARC. And then the latest version, eARC, gives us true, uncompressed, high bandwidth, high-res audio. So it is really important because places like Netflix and Amazon Prime and Apple are now doing these high-res and super awesome formats. So we've got to get the good audio back to your good audio system to watch the good content, and you're not going to be able to do it with regular ARC or with optical. So this newest eARC version is massively important for the performance of the system.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. If you have Tidal, there's tons and tons of content recorded in Dolby Atmos surround music. And if you have a Sony TV, the Tidal app in the Sony TV supports Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos will not pass through an optical cable. So you have to use ARC or eARC. The next thing too is when I first came over and I was asking the AVPro about HDMI solutions, I was asking about, 20 meters, and things like that. But there are times and needs for people to go even further, or they want to utilize that wire for even more capabilities in the future. And that's where something like optical fiber comes in, correct?
Yeah, and what we're sort of suggesting and recommending to somebody who's maybe building a home or retrofitting their home and putting in a nice AV system, or you're an integrator and you're kind of doing the same thing, we're making suggestions right now to folks to run at least one piece of 6A category cable, and then at least one piece of fiber. And you might say right now, well, what's the fiber for? That just seems, I don't get it. Category cable and HDBT and all these different things. They're giving me a picture, and I'm happy with it, and I'm fine with it. Fiber is really going to take us to the next step. We're getting to a point now with HDMI where that much bandwidth in a regular passive copper cable, if you think a 5-meter or 6-meter cable barely worked in very old versions of HDMI, you're going to be in for a real surprise and real treat when you see how sensitive those signals are with those cables when you're doing really high bandwidth. So what we're seeing right now, maybe 3, maybe 4 meters is about all the juice you have in a regular cable to get the signals where they need to be. So now we're starting to do a lot of fiber stuff, and the extender that you showed on the screen a moment ago, that fiber extender is unreal. My buddy Tom, who's with us, had a booth inside of a booth at CES, and we were in the HDMI.org booth, which was a real treat. Those folks are awesome. They are the owners, if you will, of HDMI. Super smart people. So we had that extender kit in our booth, and we were sending 4K 120 through 284 meters of fiber with no latency, and we were playing Xbox in the booth. And it was because of the fiber. You would never in a million years be able to go that kind of distance with copper. In fact, with an extender, 100 meters is about your limit. So if you need to go those extra long distances, we have customers out there who are putting in systems for their customers where there might be a security camera way, way, way at the gate to get into the property. You're not going to be able to run a piece of copper, all the way back and expect it to be okay. Fiber is fantastic for performance because it's uncompressed. It's fantastic for distances. It's really good when you start talking about EMI, electromagnetic interference. With copper, if you ran a piece of copper, maybe for category cable or HDMI, if you ran that too close to Romex that's up in your attic somewhere, you're going to get EMI problems, and you're going to have problems with the picture. Fiber, since it's light and not electrons, you don't have this issue. So if you have a really challenging environment for EMI and any kind of RF interference, go fiber. We see homes right now with these super elaborate kitchens with lots and lots of stuff in there for making different things, and people have home gyms now with treadmills, and anything with an electric motor, microwave, anything with an electric motor can cause interference. So if you're in a challenging environment, you're really, really, really cared about picture quality to where you want it to be the best and uncompressed, or you're just really, really far away, fiber is really the way to go. And we support fiber in multiple different ways. Earlier on the screen, we saw what we call an AOC cable, active optical. So the AOC cable, we can go much longer distances because the data is going down a piece of fiber inside of that cable. So it's sort of a hybrid. We have our HDMI extender, like your HDMI fiber extender, like we saw before. So there's lots of different reasons to use fiber, and it might kind of make you scratch your head today. But as you said before, what was the saying? Buy once, cry once. Is that what you said? Let's just do the fiber now. The funny thing about fiber is it can pass so much bandwidth. We have to have test equipment that can send out that much bandwidth. And for a long time there, we were kind of hitting the limits of the test equipment, and the fiber was still going. So some of the latest numbers I've seen for 100 meters, 150 gigs for 100 meters. And what are we at right now? 48 gigs. So we're talking 3 times the bandwidth. Might not be relevant today, but 5 years from now, maybe not. 10 years from now, probably. So let's just run the fiber. Let's get it out of the way. You might not use it today. You're going to use it one day. Go ahead and put it in. And the prices for fiber now, man, it's not as inexpensive as category cable, but it is way more expensive than it ever has been. So
Yeah, the
spend the
labor
extra bucks to do it.
replace it. If you don't do it, it's going to be much higher than if you had put it in to begin with.
Great point.
So say you went out and you put in a fiber, and I love this, you put in an optical HDMI cable, and all of a sudden HDMI goes the way of the dinosaur, right?
Sure.
And now there's a new end on the end of this particular, they don't make HDMIs anymore. Well, that cable can still pass that insane amount of bandwidth. So you can literally cut the ends off of this cable, re-terminate it, and you still have this super high bandwidth cable going from room to room. So if the next one is called PMI or whatever, you can actually use that. You would just put those terminals on it, or you would get an extender, terminate it, put a new extender, and do it that way.
You're exactly right, but I do want to make sure that we're super clear on something for the folks listening and watching. You're not going to re-terminate that with a HDMI connector. If you could pull up the extender kit where you could see the connections on it with fiber, there's a little blue connector on the extender kit for the fiber. So you would re-terminate the fiber with what we commonly call an LC connector. So inside of that HDMI cable, the AOC cable, you're exactly right. You cut the ends off. You have 4 pieces of fiber in there, each one capable of a massive amount of bandwidth and a massive amount of data. So you can use one for your audio video. You can use another one for internet. You have 4 in there, so you can do kind of whatever you want. You would just cut the end off, strip the piece of fiber that you want to use, terminate it with an LC connector, and now you can use an extender kit like what you see right here. And again, 284 meters, still doing 4K 120 with no latency. That's pretty impressive. And if you want to do this stuff in the future, get it out of the way now.
So HDBT is a great solution. It's pretty darn good. 4K HDR at 60 frames per second, and it even supports ARC, right? Moving into fiber gives you, of course, if you need longer links, you want more bandwidth, you want more peace of mind when it comes to being able to utilize it pretty much almost forever. That is where you would go there. Now, you guys also have another system, and you were talking about it today, and that's the MXNet. So can you talk a little bit about what MXNet is and what is this video over IP stuff? Because this is something it's growing in with a commercial, but most enthusiasts never heard of video over IP.
So video distribution, as we all know, dealing with HDMI, it has its challenges, and once you really get used to it and know how HDMI works, it's not so bad, but it's not like this. Think of an AV over IP system is basically you're distributing audio video signals throughout a project, but you're using it as if it was an IP network. So when you look at the switch you have on the screen right now, do you see any HDMI connections there?
Nope.
No. it's all category cable. So the idea here is you take your source, let's just say Apple TV, the source gets plugged into an encoder, the encoder, with a combination of the switch, you send that signal to another room. In the other room, you have a decoder, so that turns the category cable back into HDMI, and boom, you're back into the display. Now, here's the great thing about AV over IP. Because it works like a network, it's basically plug and play. There's not a whole heck of a lot of configuration you have to do, and it can do a lot of really cool things. One system that we have, we call it the 10G system because it's 10 gigs. You can do very, 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 very lightly compressed audio video from one point to another, and it's easy as setting up a network. And because it's mostly plug and play with very little configuration, you don't have to be a networking engineer. And I'll just tell you, because my background is AV, when I start talking about networking and hearing about networking, I'm like, oh crap, now I got to relearn, now I got to really learn networking, which is not the funnest thing for me, but you still got to learn it. But you don't have to be some networking whiz or some networking engineer to get this stuff to work. In fact, we do demos all over the place where making the physical connections takes longer than booting up the system and getting a picture on the screen, because it works just like an AV network. So it's super reliable, and you can incorporate your internet traffic with your AV over IP system with something like a VLAN. But I think what makes our system a little different from others is the interaction with doing your configuration and setting the system up is with a program that's ours called Mentor. So the Mentor program, you open up with a web GUI. The system consists of a few pieces. You have your network switch, which, by the way, we make. We don't buy XYZ brand of switch and throw an AVPro logo on it. We make the switch from scratch with some very, very smart people who we've worked with now for a couple years who specialize in network switches. The Mentor software makes the setup super easy. Because the switch is ours, we can make the system virtually plug and play. Because the entire system is ours, you might call up and say, hey, we're doing this project with 55 endpoints and 12 sources. We could even pre-configure that switch for you. So when you do get it on site, it is literally plug and play, and you don't have to do any configuration with it. The Mentor system's awesome too, because what you're seeing on the screen right now is an iPad. As long as you have the IP address, so you've got the switch itself, which dictates all the traffic. You have what we call the C box, or the control box. That's the brains of the whole operation. And then you have your encoders and decoders based on how many sources and how many displays. So when you log into the control box with Mentor to set your system up, what you're seeing here on the left side of the screen are all of your sources, and what you're seeing in the middle of the screen is a 2x2 video wall. So I can literally take my mouse and drag one of the sources over to one of those displays, and I'll see it on the TV immediately. It's really, really cool. You can even simplify it even more. This is a very, very popular solution for bars, restaurants, and that type of thing, because you've got many, many TVs, and we've got a lot of case studies with some really cool projects with many, many endpoints. So if you work at the restaurant and somebody says, hey, can we watch this game on that TV? They can pull out an iPad, they can literally press on the source and drag it over to the display, and boom, there it is. Or if there's a video wall situation like you see right here, you can put one game on one TV, one game on another TV, and now you're looking at 4 different games on the video wall. Or it's the Super Bowl, and you put all four of those TVs are showing one source, so you got this nice big giant image. Take it a step further with our 10G system, we have something called multi-view. I could do, if we had that 2x2 video wall that you see on the screen right now, potentially, if I had enough sources, I could do 17 sources on one of those displays. So what's 17 times 4? So we could potentially see that many sources on this one 2x2 video wall, or maybe it's one giant 120-inch screen with a projector or micro LED or something like that. So the versatility of it and what you can do with it, we can also do some other trick things. You go into a museum and they have a bunch of different panels shaped and turned a different way, and some of them are long ways. Maybe it's a menu at a restaurant, or so you can create like this mosaic type thing where you've got displays on the wall of all different shapes, sizes, et cetera, but you can still make like one big image with the Mentor software. You just have to tell it how big the screens are, how big the bezels are, a few other things like that. But you could look at, and we see this in corporate lobbies and museums especially, where you walk in, you've got this really funky video wall up on the wall, but it still shows images and sources and things like if they were just regular TVs, if you will. So the video wall stuff, the multi-view stuff, and the fact that the system is super easy to install and super easy to program and easy to use for the end user, man, it is a killer system.
Okay. So let's real quickly compare and contrast, or
Sure.
against because the two, when people see the cable, they go HDBT versus
AV over IP?
MXNet, right?
Yep.
So the benefit of MXNet is simplicity,
Yes.
the amount of TVs,
Yes.
how robust it is,
Right.
right? And like I said, all of the different ways you can configure it. Why would someone still sometimes maybe opt to use HDBT for a smaller solution?
So you're exactly right. If you are in your home and you have 3 sources and 4 TVs, MXNet is fantastic and it's a great solution, but it potentially could be kind of overkill. You're not going to put a 48 or 24 or even a 12 port switch in for a smaller system like that. You probably would use something like HDBT. Another good example, and you've seen millions of these, we now have projectors that have the HDBT receiver built in. So you just have to run a piece of category cable to it. You don't have to have an actual separate box as a receiver. So I really look at this as, what are you trying to do? What is the environment like? What is the job site like? If you really want to get crazy, that 48, any of them for that matter, but if you look at that 48 port switch for MXNet, you can stack them forever. So 48 times however many displays you might have in the system, you can stack switches and you can expand it literally forever. I have a picture, and maybe you could show it during the recording, but we mocked up a system in one of our labs where it was, I believe it was 8 sources and 256 endpoints. You know, you're going to need something like AV over IP for something like that. So the AV over IP system, the 10G system, looks fantastic. It's very, 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 very little compression, and if the signal's under 10 gigs, it's no compression, and it's as reliable and whatnot as a regular network switch. So it's a really, really great solution. And the other thing too, I'll point this out. Maybe your house was wired with category cable 10 years ago, and that's all you got. So yes, you could still use HDBT. Yes, you could use MXNet, because the backbone of all that is simple category cable, which we all know and we all have access to for not a lot of money anymore. So they're both great solutions. They just kind of, it depends on the job. It really does.
Yeah.
When you need
So,
many
I like the way that you
endpoints.
said it. 2 or 3 TVs or one TV going to one AVR.
Right.
HDBT is a great solution for that. You get into bigger jobs or gigantic home, 12 TVs, you'd be amazed. You can get 12 TVs in a large house pretty quickly.
Very cool.
So if you have a large home or a restaurant, a large facility, and you want to be able to have the flexibility of doing a whole lot of things, that is where MXNet comes in.
Well,
all right. So Jason, I'm going to have to let you go.
I know.
But I do
forever.
want to thank you for coming and talking about long distance solutions. Now, to let you know, we've talked about these types of solutions in previous sessions, so we'll put a link down. So if you really want to dive more into things like HDBT and fiber and data and how does an HDMI cable work, I've had Jason on several times, and we will provide links for that stuff as well. But we just want to let you know that there's multiple ways to get a video signal from point A to point B, either regardless of how long that distance is, whether it's active HDMI cables, HDBT extenders.
We got you covered. If you need help designing a system or building a system, we have sales engineers specifically for that. So we don't want you guys to feel like intimidated by these systems or whatnot. Give us a call. We're happy to help you through it. That's why we're here.
Okay. So Jason, thank you very much. And those out there, we will talk to you soon.